everyone. You're listening to The Future of Food Is You, a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Abena Anim-Somuah, and each week I talk to emerging talents in the food world, and they share what they're up to, as well as their dreams and predictions for what's ahead. I love this new generation of chefs, bakers, and creatives making their way in the worlds of food, drink, media, and tech. This week's episode is coming to you from Mexico City. I've been spending a lot of time here in the last year and getting to know the local culinary scene. Today's guest is Silvana Pijoan. Silvana is a second-generation vintner producing wines on her family estate, Pijoan. Pijoan's vineyards are in Ensenada, a coastal town located in the Mexican wine region of Valle de Guadalupe. Silvana and I chat about the process from grape to glass, how she convinced her father to start bottling natural wines, and what the future holds for Mexico's wine production region. Stay tuned for our chat. Thank you to Kerry for supporting The Future of Food Is You. Kerry is the iconic Irish brand famous for its beautiful cheese made with milk from Irish grass-fed cows. It's winter here in New York and lots of other places, as you know, and I love to brighten the season with my favorite Kerry cheeses. Kerry Cashel Blue Farmhouse cheese has become a staple in my salads. The creamy, delicious texture has that distinct blue cheese bite and is the star of my kale and walnut salads. Soup season is also in full swing. Kerry has some great recipes on their site, and one I have in frequent rotation is roasted broccoli soup with Kerry Dubliner with Irish stout cheese. The sweet and nutty flavor and caramel notes take it to the next level. And then the sandwich of the season, of course, is grilled cheese. Upgrade yours with a Kerry Reserve cheddar, which is sharp, strong, rich, and smooth. For us snackers out there, a personal cheese plate always hits the spot. Kerry Skellig, a rich and tangy sweet cheese, pairs perfectly with tart apple slices, your favorite crackers, or a pickle or two. Look for Kerry cheese at your favorite supermarket, specialty grocery store, or cheese shop. Visit kerrygoldusa.com for recipes, product information, and a store locator. I have some great news. The Future of Food Is You is going back on tour, and our first stop is in Miami. Team Cherry Bomb and I are hosting a live podcast event on Friday, March 8th at Valerie Chang Compa's newest restaurant, Maddie's. We'll have great talks and panels, snacks and drinks, plus networking. I'm excited to meet the folks who make up Miami's food scene and hope you can join us. March 8th also happens to be International Women's Day, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate than with the Miami Bomb Squad. Thank you to our friends at Kerry Walmart, and Open Table for making this tour stop possible. Visit cherrybomb.com to get your ticket before they sell out. I'd love to see you there. Now, let's check in with today's guest. Silvana, thank you so much for joining us on The Future of Food Is You.
Thank you for having me.
Can you tell us where you grew up and how did food show up in your life?
I'm from Ensenada, Baja California. I was born and raised there. And food, I imagine it just showed up in my life in the family kitchen table and in street food with friends, and it's just like regular activities like that. My memories from my childhood is both my parents cook really well, but back then my mom was mainly cooking, and it was just traditional family Mexican cuisine, like red rice with vegetables and chicken tinga and mole and stuff like that.
You're living in Baja California, which is in the northwest part of the country. What does food look like there in terms of street food, or what are you normally eating when you go out to eat?
It's a lot of seafood, so fish tacos are an all-time favorite. Cocktail de mariscos like shrimp and octopus and clam, or like fresh clams. Basically that.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. You are the second generation in your family to start making wine at your family vineyard, Pijoan.
Yes.
Can you tell us how your father, who's first generation, got his start in making wine?
He's originally a veterinarian, more like a researcher for cattle, not like cats and dogs. They're from Mexico City, and they moved to Ensenada in the 80s, escaping from the earthquake here in Mexico City in the 85. But he was very unhappy with his work back then. It was really monotonous, and he was bored, and I guess he never really wanted to be that initially, but being a baby boomer, like you had to study something professional and that you could have like a PhD.
Yeah.
And
your job needed a real title. Yeah, totally.
And he was struggling with his midlife crisis in his 40s, and he had always been passionate about wine. Him having grown up in a Catalan family and always having wine in the table. Back then, Valle de Guadalupe wasn't the wine scene that it is today. And Hugo da Costa, who is a really important person in the industry, He had just started working at Santo Tomás, which is one of the oldest winery there. And he started giving like a one-on-one how to make wine courses, specifically like aimed for the researchers in Ensenada, which is a big community. And that's how my dad started.
Like scientific researchers?
There's a big community of...
oh, yeah, like agricultural type of stuff. Totally.
So that's how he started. It just started as a hobby and it took over his life.
That's amazing. I mean, what better way to solve your midlife crisis than buy a vineyard, right?
Yeah.
Were there any things that your dad took from his time as a veterinarian into the vineyard? Were there any skills you thought that he transferred over?
He's very methodical and like very autodidactic, like when you teach yourself.
Yeah.
Very into books. He knows how to read and is very patient. And also he has like a PhD in microbiology and pathogens. So that translates really well into fermentation. He had some teachings, but also he was very passionate and like took all his learning techniques into learning this new technique for his life. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, his scientific mind really translates in the way he makes wine. He's like very methodical, very organized. Yeah, he's always researching more.
I want to talk a little bit about you and your first memories growing up on the vineyard. What was that like? Were you just hauling grapes with your dad as a toddler? I'm just so curious to know what it's like to grow up on a vineyard.
Well, it happened when I was like 8 or 9. So before that, I remember sheep and cows from my father's other line. And when they bought the small estate, I remember mostly like converting it a bit and like trying to build things in deciding where and planting and things going wrong and then rebuilding again and stuff like that. Mostly I remember the frogs and the big rocks and playing around them and just
weren't paying any attention to the grapes or
not
anything.
Really.
Well, that sounds so beautiful. It sounds like you've been close to wine your whole life, but this wasn't the end goal for you. You actually grew up becoming really passionate about ballet specifically, and you were training to be a professional ballet here in Mexico City.
Yeah.
Where did the spark of dancing come from, and how far did you get into your journey before transitioning into wine?
They were always happening at the same time. Me and my sisters, we all took ballet classes as young kids, like really early on, like 5 years old or something like that. But I don't know, ballet is so magical, so it's difficult not to fall in love with it completely.
Totally.
It's a really passionate art form. So when I was 10 or 11, I got more competitive and I realized that it was a difficult art form and that you have to be committed completely. I struggled in like deciding, is this what I want to do professionally? Because I knew it was going to be a tough life. But eventually I feel like the decision was made for me in the way that I never stopped taking it so seriously. So when it was time to decide like where I want to go, I had already been like planning to graduate a bit before so I could come to Mexico City, the youngest that I could and all of that. And when I came to Mexico City, again, I was also working for wine stuff related. Mm-hmm. So it was always between the two of them.
How old were you when you moved here?
I was 18.
Okay. So right after high school. And
mm-hmm.
Let's transition from turning and go back to the vineyard. So at some point, you decide that you want to become a full-time vintner. You want to spend all your time on the farm, especially your family's farm. What made you decide to become a vintner? And what was it like working alongside your dad for those first few years?
Interesting. It wasn't so much as a decision that I specifically took. It was something that I was deciding like, oh, it's a difficult decision, like give up dancing and move back home, or like not be completely committed into wine and trying to struggle these two lives. And I did that for a while, but mostly I feel like my actions took the decision for me again. Back then I was supposed to like, okay, I'll dedicate 1 year completely to wine and then 1 year completely to dance. And then I stopped dedicating years to dance and just like being completely absorbed into winemaking. What made me decide, I saw that, he would hate me for saying this, but I saw that my father was struggling a bit taking care of a ranch and also like all of the other things involved in wine.
Yeah.
It's hard work, and I was seeing that the vineyard was almost dying and in really deep need of attention. The cellar work was also like a bit unorganized, and the team needed some guidance, and there were so many things that I saw like really where he needs the help is back there. Of course, he never asked. He's like, no, everything's okay. No, you keep doing your life. But I saw that it's like, this is not going to be sustainable for long. And if I'm going to go into this, it's better to do it as soon as possible.
What was it like making those first cases with him? Like, obviously, you'd grown up kind of being around it, obviously helping to some capacity. Now it's your full-time job, and now you're making decisions alongside your dad.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Initially, at the beginning, I think it was easy because being like his young Padawan and like he's teaching me his way of life and everything. That was a really peaceful side of the process. But then it was also difficult, like arranging myself within the team, and it was like an all-male team, and like I was struggling a bit to like find my place and find how to fit in there and stuff like that. Later, it became a bit more difficult when I started making wine, and then we had like different ideas, and then we started like crashing a bit more.
Yeah.
But it was like a necessary process, I guess.
So obviously, wine is great, but a lot of us don't really know the process of making wine. So can you describe, at least at Pijoan Farms, what's the process from grape to glass?
Okay, so right now we're in winter. It's usually a busy time around the season. It's when you prune the vines, and also since we are replanting some large parts of the vineyard, it's also like get out of the nursery the plants that you're planting.
The seedlings.
Like make the holes, add the compost into the holes, add the compost into the aisles, like cover crops, and like a lot of the planning that you're going to be harvesting throughout the year.
Happens now.
So you work a lot of the soil, and then you plant and you prune, and it's raining. So we're always hoping for a good rain season and a cold season. Afterwards, it starts waking up, and you still have some time. So we usually dedicate that to rearrange the cellar, like start preparing a bit, like what do we need for this year's harvest. And it's a sort of like a free time, so we get to travel around and do some events, some tastings. It's a bit of a free time, but not you never really get a free time in wine. Then you get harvest throughout August up to late October. Then by November, December, you're still barreling and like racking, and the wine is done, but not fully. Like it's still doing some malolactic, and there's still some batches that need to go into barrel or outside of barrels. And within all of that, it's bottling.
Okay, so you're bottling. It sounds like so
we're bottling
winter,
now.
You're bottling now. Okay, winter is pruning, planting. Letting it grow till spring, and then summer still growing, and then you're harvesting in the fall. Mm-hmm. In the fall, you're bringing stuff to the barreling, pressing, doing all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then in that same time frame, you're also bottling and getting ready to put things out in cellars and things like that.
We usually do it at winter when there's nothing happening at the cellar, but it's happening in the vineyard. Mm-hmm. And before harvest, like June, July.
Okay. So
we're like getting all the reservas and like the wines that spend more time in barrel. We usually bottle them by July.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So then bottles for now it sounds like 8 months?
But some of them were there before. So it spends like maybe a year or 18 months tops.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Got it. Wow. That's awesome. And so your vineyard is a blend of, the new things that you've learned, the old things your dad has preserved. What are some of the traditions and technologies that are incorporated into making the wines? Are there specific machines you're using or techniques to help bottle?
We're a very handmade winery, so we don't have a lot of machines and technology. I feel like I don't know how to make wine with a lot of technology. Our presses are basket press that you have to like do it manually. We got one with a glove inside, so it's like easier to work with, but it's still very rustic. Mm-hmm. Like
a glove?
It has like a balloon. It's a balloon that inflates from the inside, but it's still a basket press.
So it's like a pneumatic press almost. Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a pneumatic and an hydraulic press.
Oh, sick. That's
but
really
they're
cool.
both basket presses, so it's like a small capacity. If you're pressing more than 3 tons, it's a long day of work.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm used to hard-working vintages, harvests. And I haven't had really the experience of like the technology and like presses where you just like press buttons and it can work on its own. Mm-hmm. I hope I get there one day.
Yes.
But yeah, we both share like the ability of multitasking and like being proud or like being really guilty if you can't do it properly, of like you have to be aware of where everything is moving, and meanwhile you have to be checking that everything is healthy, and you have to be checking the processes, and so it's very like that for the both of us.
Oh, so you have the press, and then is there another thing you're using, like another machine of sort, to like collect the wine, or is it just kind of going straight into barrels after you press?
We have the destemmer, where you separate like the
stem from the grape.
The stem from the grape. So we have that. after that, it's like by bucket. We fill the tank or the barrel or the bin. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Then just the press and I guess the tanks. And we do have the bottling machine.
Yeah. Okay, wow. It's much more simple than I thought, because I guess you're just waiting for it to sit there for a certain amount of time before you can serve it up.
So you go from the destemmer if you want to use it, because it's not necessary depending on the wine you're making. And then it's the fermentation process, whether it's in a tank or in a barrel or in a flex tank or something like that. Then you sediment and then you rack, and you're this line of racking from one place to the other. Later, the aging process, which we usually incorporate into most of the wines, except some of the whites and rosés. Then it's a few months, and then you rack it again into a tank and prepare for bottle in the next few weeks.
Oh, very cool. Wow. You mentioned whites and rosés. What are the typical wines that are coming out of your family's vineyard?
Recently, we've been more focused on younger wines. It's more sustainable for the winery because it's like a faster movement. It's also like what the people are drinking nowadays. And it's also, I think, what we like to drink nowadays too. But my dad is also like a real fanatic of like elegant, complex red wines.
Yeah.
So we do have a lot of those too. It's a balance between the two. I feel like it's 50-50.
And when you say younger wines, like, are you talking 2 years, 3 years coming out, or what does that mean?
Younger wines, I would say like 2 years. Like for now it's 24. They will be 22, 23 still. Like the fresh new wine coming out of the harvest, the recent harvest, like that. For the rosés and the whites, it's mostly like that. If some of them have aging, it's like 8 months in a barrel, so it's still coming out the following year.
Yeah.
And for the reds, like maybe they spend a year in a bottle or something like that, but not that long time.
Red, white, rosé are giant classifications. Can you tell us about maybe 2 reds you're making, 2 whites you're making, and 2 rosés?
For example, whites, my dad makes one that he has made before for many years. He has the family line, like very, very corny.
Love it.
It has the names of all the female in the family. We're all women.
Yes.
2 sisters. I'm the youngest. There's a white wine that's called Silvana. It has my name.
Very cool.
And it's the classic type of a white wine that we make in Baja, because it's of the seafood and everything. We tend to go to like crisp, acidic, fresh white wines, like stainless steel to bottle.
And what grape would you use for a wine like that?
This one is a Chenin Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc, and a bit of Moscatel to give it the aromatics.
Very nice. So it's a blend of the 3. Very cool.
And for me, I'm making a white that is more like my take on oxidative whites. It's called La Poubelle. It's also a Sauvignon Blanc from a small parcel, but it's done differently. Like it has some skin contact, and then it's fermented in oak, left with oxygen in the oak, so it has like this sherry notes and like a lot of work with the lees. So it's a really different type of white from the Silvana. Yeah,
I got to try that. I know at the time we recorded this, yesterday you did a tasting at my favorite wine shop here in Mexico City, Remesa Wines. And I got to try La Poubelle. And that's also your dog's name, which is really cute.
Yeah.
I loved it a lot. It kind of tasted like a lighter version of a port, which, I mean, I've never really found that in like a sweet wine, but it was very refreshing and crisp. Okay, how about the reds? What are some reds that you're making?
The reds, we have some full carbonic maceration, Grenache and Syrah. My dad also loves this method, so he has for his younger reds some that have a hint of a carbonic maceration. And then for the most classical ones, we have, for example, a dry farm old vine, Zinfandel, which is really classic in California and also in Baja California. Yeah. Zinfandel grows really well, and it always wants to be this like big red wine. Even if you don't want it to, it wants to be. So we have that, and it has like this port notes too, but really acidic. It's a really nice wine. And then for my dad, also like very classical lines, like, I don't know, Syrah and Carignan or Grenache, and he also makes like a Bordeaux blend, Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, which is a classic here and everywhere in the world. But it's also one of the type of wines that was really famous when the wine scene in Valle de Guadalupe started.
Yeah. That's really cool. And then for rosés, your rosés are kind of on the darker, I guess, more slightly bolder side.
Yeah, they are on the like neon rosé side. We try not to, but for example, the one you tried is Árbol de Fuego, which I think of it as a type of a Blanc de Noir, because I strive to make a white wine out of it. But Zinfandel is just like so extravagant and always wants to be noticed. And just by pressing it, it just gives off a lot of color.
Yeah.
That one is a Zinfandel en Grenache, and the one that my dad makes is also a Grenache and Colombard.
Very cool. Wow, that's amazing. It's so funny to hear that grape types or grape varieties have personalities.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be paying attention to those Zinfandel bottles. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of The Future of Food Is You is brought to you by Oishi. Oishi is the company behind the world's largest indoor vertical strawberry farm, and their mission is to raise the standard of fresh fruit in America. Oishi berries are grown without pesticides and are perfectly ripe, fresh, and always in season. So, how did the brand come to be? In 2016, Oishi's founders Hiroki Koga and Brendan Somerville brought seedlings of an omakase berry from the Japanese Alps to Jersey City. Now, their indoor vertical farms replicate a perfect day in Japan, complete with warm light, mild heat, and buzzing bees. Recently, one of our producers, London Crenshaw, was invited to a dinner to experience each of Oishi's berry varieties. She found the two strawberry varieties, omakase and koyo, to be very distinct from each other. She thought the koyo berry was tart and complex with a firm texture, while the omakase was creamy with a delicate sweetness. Think quintessential strawberry flavor. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely going to be checking out my local Whole Foods for Oishi berries so I can start adding them to my granola bowls in the morning. If you want to learn more about Oishi or see where you can find them near you, check out oishi.com.
Hi, everybody. Kerry Diamond here. I'm the founder of Cherry Bomb. We are excited to announce that Open Table is partnering with Cherry Bomb on our Sit With Us community dinner series, which highlights amazing female chefs and restaurateurs in the Cherry Bomb network. Tickets for our next two dinners are on sale right now. We'll be at Chef Eileen Andrada's restaurant, Amelia's 1931 in Miami on March 7th, and Ellen Yin's Fork in Philadelphia on March 13th. Stay tuned for details about our dinner in Washington, D.C. How does it work? You can come solo and sit at a Cherry Bomb community table, or bring a friend or two and we will seat you together. Tickets are available exclusively on Open Table. Just search for the restaurant on the Open Table app or opentable.com and go to the Experiences tab to purchase a ticket, which includes a welcome drink and a 3-course or family-style meal. A portion of the proceeds from each dinner will benefit a local charity. Learn more about the Open Table and Cherry Bomb Sit With Us series at cherrybomb.com.
When you were deciding to really become a decision maker at the winery, you want to also incorporate a lot of learnings from the natural wine world. So a few of your wines are natural and biodynamic. I'm curious to hear, what were your early learnings about the natural wine movement?
Like everybody else in Mexico and probably in the world, we all came across natural wine as like, oh, it's funky. And
funky orange.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And initially there was some type of resistance, like being from a family of winemakers, like, oh, what is this movement, la la la. At the same time, I was struggling with the wine in general. Like it felt like it could be Italian, French, from the US or everything, but it always had like the same taste. It's like a crispy white or a Provence rosé or like, I don't know, it always had the same feeling and it's like very generic. It felt like all of this terroir that they were speaking about that like I couldn't really notice it everywhere. It just felt like every wine tasted the same in a way. And I think one of the first wines that I tried is a Nestarek, which is like an impeccable natural winemaker from Czech Republic.
Can you spell that for us?
Nestarek is Nestarec. Nestarek. I tried that one and it's like, wow, is this natural wine? But it looks so clear and it's not cloudy and it's not funky. And it also tasted and smelled really differently to what I was used to, but in a good way. So this got me really interested and I started reading more about it and I started trying to find natural wines because it was difficult to find in Mexico and in Ensenada. It's still difficult to find. And by reading about it, I became like super interested in like how I'm curious about how the vineyards that we work with would manifest if we don't intervene in something as simple as like the yeast. Like what if we trust the yeast that the vineyards that we're working with have? Like what is this?
Like the grapes themselves are producing.
Yeah. Like it's the microbiology that the parcel in itself has. But in like the conventional wine, I don't know why it's something, I don't know, like demonic possession can happen if you don't add yeast. Like anything can go wrong. I don't know. It was always something of a topic like, no, you don't do that. You don't trust native yeasts. They're horrible.
Okay, so that's the difference between natural wine and conventional wine is that in natural wine, most of the grapes are creating the yeast to ferment. Whereas in conventional wine, you're adding the yeast to some extent.
Mainly it's about the yeast, but it's basically about not adding and not removing. So I feel like the yeast, it's the least of the problems. Like when you can add something, you can really add like color, aromas, texture, or remove like alcohol, or make a white out of a red wine. And like really, you don't even know what you're drinking anymore. But yeah, fermentation is always aided by yeasts that are selected from different strains, and it's like, this is an Australian strain of yeast, and it gives you this like tropical aromas, la 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 la.
Okay.
And it does represent it in the glass, in the wine that you're tasting,
in the notes that you're trying and stuff. Interesting. Okay.
So natural wine relates more to the agriculture of the vineyards that you're working, to like sort of have more diverse microbiology that's going to represent in like healthier fermentations and like specific aromas and taste profiles that make it unique.
Yeah. So it's like you're just letting the grape do its thing. Like just show it everything you've got based on like the terroir of the land, or like the season or the conditions. So it's almost like natural wine gives you more of like a time capsule of the year in the bottle, it sounds like. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Very cool. And so what was it like then, after you've read these books, you're trying more wines, how did you then slowly start to incorporate those learnings into the wines at Pijoan?
Well, I started to like push my dad into, let's make a natural wine. And he was like, no, they're really bad. No. Why would you want to do that? And eventually I convinced him of like doing, I don't know, like half a ton or something like that. And I feel like the first time you make natural wine, when you weren't doing that, you're always so scared. Like, I have to leave the grape do whatever it wants, but I'm just going to be here standing and not touch it. And like, you don't want to get involved. But I feel like that's not the way to do it. So it turned out okay, but then it was a wine that went down after 6 months. Like it didn't have enough structure to hold.
So it was a bad case.
But it was a good enough case
that
my dad became interested enough to like, okay, let's repeat it. And meanwhile, I grew more about it. And eventually he was like, I feel like you have to start making your own wines aside from the family project.
Keys to the kingdom. Very cool. Yeah.
And like your questions that need to be asked, and I can't answer them. So I feel like you have to start your own investigation and your own thing. And I started with one wine, which is Árbol de Fuego. And then I have more for the family line for Pijoan. But I also have like my secondary independent wine line.
Well, I have to ask, is there a natural wine that you're thinking about cooking up down the line, like in the next few years? Is there a particular grape or flavor or kind of flavor profile that you're going for?
Well, I've been planting a lot of Mission in my vineyard because it's really well adapted to the current conditions, principally to hydric stress.
Okay.
But I haven't had the fortune to work a lot on Mission because there's not a lot at the moment planted. So yeah, I want to get to know more about this grape and how it manifests in my estate and in my region.
Yeah.
And to see like what are the possibilities I can cook from there.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to try it once it comes out. Hopefully in the next, probably I'm guessing 4 or 5 years or so. Yeah.
Probably less because I've been planting it for a few years. But
okay, nice.
Maybe like 3 years.
Okay, great. I'm setting a timer. I really enjoyed going to the tasting again. I think it was such a great prep for this interview, but also I loved getting to kind of see, you get to understand you through your bottles. Like you made this bottle, for instance, with your partner, who's also a vintner. Can you tell us a little bit more about that wine and like how you see wine as this expression of who you are?
That's exactly it. Like I do feel like wine is also like an artistic form. I feel like more creative now than when I was a dancer.
That's so beautiful.
So much more. Like
yeah.
I also like struggle with like imposter syndrome like I did back then, but not as much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, my partner also makes wine. He's an independent producer from my region, which is quite rare because it's usually like big wineries or like family wineries. But being an independent producer is like quite a ride.
Wow, that's awesome.
And this wine we made is called cochinero, which is kind of like a mess. When you make a mess, it's called you made a cochinero. And it was kind of like our dating wine. Like we just started dating and harvest was coming and it's like, no, we're not going to make wine together. No, of course not. It's too soon.
6 month rule. Yeah, but for wine. Yeah.
But we started talking like, but if we were to, and it's like, well, I have a bit of Grenache that I don't have a home for. And it's like, I also have a bit of Grenache that I don't have a home for. What do you want to experiment? Like, I don't know, like this. I want to do this. So we made like a really small batch of many different methods and things. And it was sort of like a get to know each other and get to know our wine making style while making a wine.
That's so adorable. I mean, that's like, what beautiful thing could you come up with? Yeah, that's awesome. I know I told you I wanted to buy a bottle because my partner and I started dating in that same year. So I feel like I now need to keep it and open it for a special time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Well, I want to talk about another thing. Actually, this is the thing that I tried that first put me on to Pijoan and your family's wines. But you also make vermouths, which obviously seems quite rare for a vineyard to also be making vermouths, which is a recent addition to your lineup. Can you tell us what vermouths are and then what sparked the decision to make them?
Mm-hmm. So vermouths are wine-based beverages. It's usually wine and alcohol, sugar, and the botanical side, which is the interesting part. Mm-hmm. You have different types of vermouths, like the French are more sober and not that aromatic and more dry. And like the Spanish vermouths are like bigger and more sugary, and they have like this density. They feel like more medicinal, and the Italian are in between. And you have a lot of different vermouths. You get like whites, rosés, rosos, neros, a lot of different styles. And it always speaks about origin. Like, again, the terroir, this is represented within the botanicals. Because, of course, you're using what's around your region. Yeah. Initially, it was like foraging, and it had like this medicinal nature to vermouth. But it was also like a yummy drink, so it became more commercial too. It's funny that you say that it's not that common for a winery to be making vermouth. But initially, we felt there's always like byproducts in winemaking. And I feel like the responsible winemaker needs to resolve those issues. Like, okay, you get all these byproducts. How many products can you make out of just making wine?
Yeah.
And for example, I see at least 5. Like, okay, you make wine, but you can also make vermouth from the sediments.
So that's after your first filtration?
No, it's before fermentation.
Oh, okay.
You press and you have this juice, but it still has pectins and a bit of like soil and like heavier particles.
Yeah.
You let it sediment for, I don't know, a day or 2 with cold. You rack the clean juice, and that you ferment to make wine.
And then that sediment is what you're using to make vermouth.
Uh-huh.
Oh, very
You always
cool.
have a lot of sediments. They don't make the cut into the wine.
Yeah.
So we use those as the base of one of the vermouths. That way we're recovering like 3,000 liters per harvest of something that it was not only a waste economically, but also a possible contaminant, because if you throw it, it's acidic, so you're acidifying the soil. So it's more than an issue too, just for us. Yeah, I feel like that was the initial motivation of like, what can we do with this? And thinking around it is like, we could make like a mistela or a vermouth. A mistela is different than a vermouth, but they relate. A mistela is como like a port, but usually made out of muscatel grapes. And the port is a wine that is just fermenting, and then you add alcohol to stop the fermentation. So it's sweet. It remains with the natural grape sugars. So that's what we do with the sediments.
Wow.
And also my dad is from Catalan heritage. His parents came to Mexico as refugees from the Civil War. He had a lot of vermouth and wine while growing up. So he remembered like in his younger years, like, we used to drink a lot of sherry and vermouth back then, but now it's not popular. And also my older sister, she's an expert in native plants of Baja California. So we had...
So cool. You had the family nostalgia. You had the expertise in plants to make it happen. So when you say botanicals, what specific herbs are you using to make the vermouths?
Well, it's always a secret recipe. It's always like, no, I can't say. But
yes.
It's mainly...
Hey, I don't want you to get in trouble with the family.
I won't say everyone, but it's mostly native plants and wild, which are not like from the region but grow a lot. We focus on sage. We have 4 different types of sage. It's a white sage, which is the typical for like smudging and like cleaning the space and the spirits and everything. White sage, clevelandi, which is more, I don't know, like more feminine, more flowery. And then black sage and moonsea, which are more bitter and a bit more herbal. So we focus on the aromatics, but also we strive to make a balance of bitter, acidic, and sugar, and also the aromatics. So it's very perfumey, but it has this like strong bitterness that's also aromatic, because the native plants there, like Yerba Santa and Romerillo, also smell like, I don't know, like Christmas tree and like
you
cinnamon.
get that kind of anisey, sharp taste.
But they're bitter, so they're adding their bitterness, but also adding a lot of perfume.
I'm curious to hear your reception to the vermouths. Like, obviously, it seems like you guys are a wine family. You've been making wines, but now your vermouths are in most of the wine shops that are around the city, and I'm sure in other parts where you're also providing your wines. How have wine merchants and customers felt about the vermouths?
At the moment, we're not struggling, but it is a new challenge. It's like, okay, it's a different community. It's a different way to present the beverage. For example, somebody's not going to buy a case of vermouth. You want a bottle and you're going to keep it in your fridge for about a month or something like that. So you need to rely on stores that they carry the vermouth, but also it's something that you don't buy blindly. Like you need to have a taste of it before. So at the moment we're in that area, like, I feel like we need to do some events to present and to open up the public. Like, I like vermouth. I never thought it was like this. Most people think it's a distilled.
Yes, it's a spirit. Yeah, because normally it's in the spirit section at the wine store. Yeah.
And it's not. It doesn't taste like mezcal or tequila. It tastes like wine, really. We're still in that process of like not educating people, but like making it easy to try. And I feel like in Mexico City, it's more with everything. It first happens in Mexico City and then the rest. But it's still recently been introduced.
But it's been loved by those who are trying.
Yeah. Okay. Those who try it love it, but I just need to get them to try it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I want to talk a little bit about, the region where you're growing and producing wine, Valle de Guadalupe in Mexico. And particularly this region is really fascinating because it's been getting a lot of reputation recently to both America. Like a lot of Southern Californians are coming down. It's like they're the other version of Napa if you don't want to go north. But there are also some challenges now that have come with this, this popularity, so to speak. There's water scarcity, there's a booming tourist industry, especially in a place that was primarily agricultural, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of infrastructure to support this. The LA Times recently wrote an article at the end of last year talking about this and interviewing some people who had been there for, 50, 60 years. What's the current state of the wine industry now in Valle de Guadalupe?
It is at a fragile point at the moment. We feel like there's no other Valle de Guadalupe in Mexico. Like it's a really privileged site. It has the Mediterranean climate. It doesn't rain in the summer, which is crucial for winemaking, grape growing. It has the cold winters and the rainy season in the winter. It has the proximity to the Pacific coast, so it has this cold sea breeze coming each morning. So it's always been an agricultural site, not always been grape growing site, but it's always been an agricultural site. And when the wine industry it had like a good 20, 25 years of like developing, but also like the spotlight was hit on the tourism that was attracting a lot of people from all over the world to come and see the vineyards and try the wines. And like there's a really good food scene there.
Yes.
Both in Ensenada and in Valle. You eat amazing. So of course it attracted a lot of sharks, and it's been overly developed. And at the moment it's a bit sad because the price of the land has gone up. So I cannot aspire to buy land there. And it's been bought and like sectioned for Airbnbs and cabañas and I don't know, stuff like that. I feel like there's too many. There's no way they're all profiting. They're trying to help the tourism, but without understanding that there are different types of tourism. So for a while, we've been struggling like some type of resistance because they've been favoring like bars and discotheques and casinos even to like...
As opposed to like you could be hosting tours on your farm or something like that. Yeah.
So it's like, no, but tourism is tourism. And it's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
Not all tourism is what we want, because now sometimes we get people and it's like, I don't drink wine. Can you make me a mojito? And it's like, I'm a winery. Why would I make a mojito? But it's changing. Like it's becoming more... It happens everywhere in Mexico. Like there's something very beautiful and special about it, and they like completely destroy it and become, I don't know, like a party place.
Yeah.
So that is happening a bit, and also like the insecurity, has not gone up because it has been worse in the past. It's like they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So mainly it's just that we are afraid of like losing the possibility of working the land, and there's a shortage of water because now there's this whole demand to supply. And there hasn't been rain as much as before, so we haven't been recovering, and the vineyards have been struggling, and it's like raising a question of like how long can we afford to be here in these conditions?
Oh. Well, I guess then, what do you hope the future for wine is in Valle de Guadalupe, and how do you hope that the region achieves, intentional global recognition? Because again, Mexican wines are still getting up there slowly and slowly, you know, holding the same reference as like a wine from Napa or a wine from Italy or France or even Spain?
I feel like this problem that we have at the moment is not going to continue to grow. Eventually it will explode. Like there's only like so many capitalistic ways you can put in a singular place and before it flops, like not everyone is going to do well.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that in the next years, like the ones that are like focused on the well-being of the region and like the economy of the communities and the wine industry but also like the agricultural industry, we'll all be more open to adaptive consciousness that we need to take and to like maybe stop planting Cabernet Sauvignon and stuff like that and like open our eyes to, okay, let's adapt to different varietals and to different types of agriculture and to like really adapt into what we are going for, which is, it's not that we're not going to have any water because it does rain, but like adapting into, okay, harvesting most of that rain for the agricultural uses and then like learning how to reuse most of the water and then planting like hybrids and more productive varietals that don't take up as much water as, for example, Cabernet Sauvignon. What I would hope for is like the community becomes like more close and more informed into the obstacles that we're going to have eventually.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I think many wine regions have faced this, you know. Wine regions are very important for employment, for maintaining, you know, agricultural nativity for a place. But let's talk a little bit more about where your wines are. So I know most of our audience is in the U.S. Can you tell us about the process of stocking your wines in different wine stores and restaurants? And do you have a philosophy about where you want your wines to end up?
Yeah, definitely. Mostly I sell here in Mexico, mostly in Mexico City because it's a huge demand here. But yeah, initially I work with a distributor. It's called Fermentos, which is a pioneer in natural wine here in Mexico. And yeah, initially the question was like, what do you want me to do with your wines? Do you want me to just sell them everywhere, or do you want me to like be more consistent with specific places? And I think that's important. Like if I'm not gonna be able to be there to represent them, I want them to be in compatible places that they can like grow this community and like really understand the wine, and also that they care about the wine. It's not just like something commercially attractive that they need to have or something like that. And in the US, I've been lucky to find along the way really compatible and people that I admire so much that are now my importers. So I work with them and I have to visit them not frequently, but as frequently as I can.
Yeah.
And I've been learning like the routines that they have and the places that they visit. And it's mostly, I learn a lot from them because it's also a brand new market and a brand new perspective on how to drink wine. So it's like I'm always very interested in like, wow, the California people drink wine so differently than the New York people.
Of course, yeah.
It's always so interesting. At the moment, it's mostly Mexico, and in the US, I started working in the New York area through several wine selections, who is great. And recently, I started working in California with Amy Atwood Selections. She works with a lot of female winemakers too, so it's been cool to like be a part of the portfolio.
Oh, very fun.
Mostly I work through them, so I'm not always sure like which restaurants and stores are carrying our wines, but I always try to keep a communication like, hey, where can they find them? But if in need, it's always, I always recommend like checking their websites, like Several Vines and Amy Atwood's, to see which stores they're carrying. And as to where I want my wine to go, I don't know, it's maybe like too egotistical of every winemaker, but of course I would like to see it in Europe and in France and stuff like that. I would love to get some wine to the Tokyo wine scene, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But then also it becomes like, okay, but it's the carbon footprint of like taking your wine so far away. And it's like, okay, mainly I focus on the national wine scene.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to get some south, like to Guatemala or to like Colombia.
Yeah, Brazil, Argentina, also big wine markets as well. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Mexico City wine scene. Being here in the last year or so, there have been obviously, you know, staple wine bars. You know, you've got Loop, Hugo, Cicatrice, Neve, just to name a few. How has it been bringing your wines here, and what has the reception been like? And how does it feel being part of the scene here? Because it's just such an incredible scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was lucky again to find the community that I have at the moment, Because I remember this like wine scene, I feel like happened in 2020 or 2019. Like the pandemic really rearranged the food and wine scene in Mexico City. And I remember before when I was working for the family line, like trying to enter the industry and trying to find the community, and it was impossible. Like I couldn't get in. Everything was like too interconnected, but in a way that it wasn't relatable, and I didn't know how really to fit in, and I feel like I had to fake it a bit. And nowadays it just sort of happened naturally. Like I had a wine that I wanted to move, and I tried to do it initially like independently, and I started knocking on restaurants, and it's like, oh no, we're not interested. And then pandemic hit, and I started working with my distributor, which opened up a lot of lines to me, and he was also growing
Who's
at
your
the moment.
distributor?
Fermentos, it's Alonso Maldonado
Okay.
and Jair Telles. And the wine scene was changing at the moment, and also the way people ate. I feel like before the pandemic, it was more like, I don't know, fancier restaurants like Pujol, like really, I don't know, like really fine dining and like a bit more serious. And then everybody became a tortillero, or they all had like cooking
Pop-ups.
in their, the pop-ups, and they were all
Definitely.
cooking in their kitchen and like doing crazy stuff. And it rearranged everything, and it became a bit more casual. So also for the wine, it became much more casual, like pairing it with potato chips or stuff like that, instead of like, having a how do you say that?
6-course meal.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Which
Yeah,
used to
a
be
tasting menu.
always like that.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's an ever-evolving scene. And I feel like I meet a lot of people while giving tastings, and then they open up something, and it's like, really want to do this. And then a couple of years in, it's like, you did it. And now we're working together and stuff like that.
That's beautiful. I want to hear more about how you're thinking about the community that you're building, especially around growers and producers in the industry.
Yeah, that's really important. I have some like winemaker and farmer friends that I always rely on. Hey, so I've been having this issue. Has this happened to you? Yes, no, la la la. Like we have this confidence of like asking things, even if it sounds stupid or like, I don't know how to do that. Can you teach me? And it's always like a trade thing, a friendly thing. For example, Aldo Quesada from Viñas del Tigre, I learned so much from him of farming. Like, I don't know, he's done many different experimental things in his vineyard, and with great results. So from time to time, it's like, Aldo, I want to do this in this part of the vineyard, but I'm so scared. I'm not sure if it's going to work, la, la, la. And it's like, what are you trying to do? And just like building up together. We also get really well along with Noel Telles from Vichy.
Mm-hmm.
He has like bigger community ideas. Like we should all get together and like demand this sort of like rules in the prices of the grapes and in the treatment of the da-da-da-da. So he's more like organized and trying to organize us.
Yeah, it's like social activism for the farmers. Very cool.
Which is cool to have somebody that's pushing onto that. But yeah, I feel like in Valle de Guadalupe, I have a good support system. And also I've relied to in Natalia from Cava Garambullo in Guanajuato. Her and her husband, Branco, are, apart from amazing winemakers and farmers, they're also researchers and have a ton of information. She's a teacher at the university, so they're also trying to have a larger community within the country, not only the region. And they're always asking questions, and like at the moment they're striving to build a community around like sustainable practices in farming, with the aim of maybe eventually having some sort of like a signature, not like a certificate, but something like that. And that we can all share our learnings and mistakes and everything from it.
Like an institute that everyone can kind of go to. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I know you have an exciting trip coming up, and you will be joining some awesome farmers somewhere really cool. Can you tell us about it? And why is it important for you to also incorporate travel and research into the work to bring back home to Mexico?
Well, me and my partner are going to New Zealand. We're going to be doing harvest there. It also happened through the wine community, like traveling winemakers that we've met along the way. And there's one in particular that's a really good friend of my partner. And it's like, we have a spot here. You should come. And I've never been that far.
Yeah, it's quite far.
It's quite far.
On the other side of the world. Yeah.
And it's complicated to leave. For me, I'm such a control freak that it's like, I don't know how to stop, and I always feel like everything will collapse if I'm not there. But it's also a really important lesson at the moment. Like, you have to be able to to delegate, to trust your team, to trust that you've done a good enough work so far that it's not going to collapse. And if it collapses and there was something faulty in it that it needed to collapse for you to see it. And also, I'm really excited about the different perspectives that this will bring, like how they view wine, how they view farming, how they view drinking wine, what is around that community. At the moment, I'm just like really open to whatever I can get from this experience, but really excited.
We're huge manifestors on the podcast. So I'd love to ask, when you look at yourself in the next 5 to 10 years, where do you hope to see yourself? And where do you hope to see yourself, particularly in the wine industry, both as a female vintner and also as a Mexican vintner too?
Pretty much doing the same. I hope that I'm still motivated and passionate about what I'm doing. I would like to be able to have more farming freedom. So in the next 5 to 10 years, I would hope to be able to acquire some land that I can have like my life project in it and plant vines, but also like something along my life and the things that I eat and everything like that. Mainly, I just want to like find the balance between overworking myself and being oversaturated in like, I have a lot to learn and I'm like finding a balance of allowing me to also have a life outside of the wine scene and to be able to eat the cake that I've been working and cooking for so long.
Yeah, she wants to be able to enjoy and drink the wine. I love that. That's a good philosophy. I always like asking people, is there a particular person that you'd love to try your wines or invite to the vineyard? Because it sounds like you've learned from so many people. There's so many people you've admired in the industry. So yeah, who would that person be?
I would like Britney Spears to try my wine.
That's iconic.
That'd be pretty great.
Yeah, I think she would like it, especially Cochinero. I think that's a good bottle for her.
I think she'd like Árbol de Fuego.
Okay. Oh, for sure. Definitely. That's really cool. Is there anyone else?
Well, there's a lot of winemakers that I admire and respect, but I feel like I'm gonna get them to try my wine. Like eventually, I always carry a wine when I'm going to wine fairs or something like that. Life itself has led me to meet a lot of great people, and sometimes they drink my wine and I'm like, oh, please don't drink my wine. I don't want to see the face. It's always interesting and a learning opportunity.
Yeah. Well, if anyone knows Britney Spears, we have a bottle of wine for her.
Please.
In Mexico City. Yeah. Silvana, thank you so much for this conversation. I have learned so much about wine culture, Mexican culture, and hopefully one day I hope we get to visit your vineyards.
Anytime you want.
Yes, would love that. If we want to continue to support you, where are the best places to find you?
Well, strangely, I think Instagram is a good spot. It's easy.
Yeah.
And yeah, mainly through that. For the family line, it's Pijoan Vinos. Pijoan is the last name. And my personal one, which is also like my commercial one, it's Sil Pibe.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Silvana.
Thank you.
Before we go, our guest is going to leave a voicemail just talking to themselves 10 years from now. You have reached the Future of Food Is You mailbox. Please leave your message after the beep.
Hey, Silvana. This is me calling you from 2024. Just checking in to see how you're doing. I hope you're not being too hard on yourself. I'm sure by now you've accomplished many of the things that you had in mind for yourself. And if not, it was probably for a reason. I hope Pubel is around there. We love her very much. She's probably old by now, but hopefully very loved and running around there. I hope you're still in a loving relationship. Remember to always work on it as hard as you work on your job. If you haven't done it by now, remember that keeping a balance between personal life and work life is very important. You can also travel without working, so that's a note, a really important note. And also, I really hope that you went back to dancing. It's something that currently we are missing really deeply, and I feel like it would be great for our mental health. So if you did it, congratulations, and if not, I think it's time to do it by now. Take care and love yourself.
That's it for today's show. I would love for you to leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to the show. Thanks to Kerry Gold, Open Table, and Oishi for supporting today's show. The Future of Food Is You is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Thanks to the team at City Box Studios, executive producers Carrie Diamond and Catherine Baker, associate producer Jenna Sadhu, and editorial assistant London Crenshaw. Catch you on the Future Flip!